Yeah, hello. My name is Simon Vernon Harcourt. I'm Planning and Design Director at City and Country, and I'm an architect. I'm going to talk to you today about sustainable places or placemaking. I'm going to start talking about some of the projects I've done at City and Country over the last 17 years, which have really fed into how we do new build housing, which is something we've been doing more recently in the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm going to take you through some of our more recent projects. I'm going to then talk about how maps and plans influence layouts, buildings and details influence buildings and details. And probably the key thing is how you create a community rather than just a collection of buildings. So I'm going to start on the heritage side. This is a former lunatic asylum in Brentwood in Essex, which is a project we was started about 20 years ago. And the key here has been looking back at historic plans, understanding how the asylum worked at the time, recreating historic gardens that have been lost, and creating some really nice communal spaces in between the rather lovely brick buildings. Jumping around a bit, this is Bentley Priory, where a former orangery here has been converted into a series of houses. I quite like this image because it shows how we've created areas of private space that actually fit within the wider landscape. So they're designated by quite subtle estate rail fencing. This shows the larger historic building, which was remodeled by Soane. It includes a museum, which we built, and a number of apartments in there. And again, we restored the grounds to how they were historically. This is probably one of the most important heritage projects we've done over the years, which is Balls Park in Hertford, which is a Grade 1 house. It was the location of a university, and the university sold the site. We removed and demolished a number of modern buildings and restored the house back into a series of apartments. It has some rather nice, simple, elegant doll's house style detailing on the outside and proportions, but internally it has this wonderful space with this very rich, warm timber paneling. And this creates rather a magical internal communal area where the residents can get together and have a drink. And I think they put a Christmas tree up there at Christmas and things like that. And it forms the social heart of the development. We've also looked at more modern historic buildings. So we're now in Bicester near Oxford. This was a bomber command training centre during the war. City and Country purchased the site on the north east. So in this area here, which was the location for officers' messes, accommodation. There's a parade ground in the middle, hospital, essentially a large collection of buildings set within a large landscape. Here we can see one of the former accommodation blocks, which was looking onto the parade ground. The parade ground we've changed into a grassed area with a regimented line of trees, and we've put in some rather simple but kind of contemporary landscaping that fits in with the wider space. The most iconic building there is the power station, which is a mini version really of Tate Modern. And we turned this into a house. Internally, we wanted to keep some of the industrial character. So the same as we would with an historic building in terms of restoring the wonderful details. Actually, what makes this building special is the rough cast concrete and the brickwork and the metal windows and things. So it was really important for us to preserve the elements of this so that the heritage of it is not forgotten. This shows some of our earliest new build. So these are 4 detached houses. They are heavily influenced by control towers and some of the Art Deco buildings on the site, and they're widely spaced so the landscape wraps around them as the rest of the buildings do on the site. And these were really well received by the planners and residents at the time. Jumping to another project, we're in the South Downs now. This is King Edward VII Sanatorium. It's got some big hitter names involved in the design of it at the time. So Gertrude Jekyll did the landscape gardens, and the architect were Percy Adams and Charles Holden. And Charles Holden went on to do quite a number of tube stations and other buildings in London. He was only in his late 20s when he did this building. So this is how it should have been, or how it was built in 1905, with a series of step gardens to the south, and this very strong east-west axis, with to the north essentially were the admin buildings, so the kitchens, the dining rooms, offices, and then to the south was the patients' rooms. When we brought it, there was a lot of demolition to be done. So you can see there's a huge number of buildings that have infilled, and you've lost the axis. There's a lot of buildings that have lost the glazed corridor, and then you've got solid buildings all through here. So one of the keys essentially was a lot of demolition, and then we got consent for new build in some of the grounds and in some of the woodland around. So this is the front elevation now. You can see the change in brickwork, and there were some, like actually it had been extended all along the front, and you'd lost the original proportions. We've managed to put those back to how they were. This is the link restored between the admin side and the patient side, with the windows restored. So you're looking back east and west now, and this is one of the original magnolias that we can see planted in some black and white photos we have back in 1905, 1906. So this is what a 100-year-old magnolia looks like. Inside, the craftsmanship was by the best people at the time. So a lot of the joinery was by Hills of London. We know they did the furniture at the time, and they have some wonderful columns with little ebony butterfly details in them. And this is the dining room, which has the feel of a kind of New York station. These windows had all been blocked up on the left-hand side. We had these lights recreated based from original historic photographs by a company in Sheffield. And this is the main communal space for all of the residents. There are about 135 dwellings in the sanatorium. There's another 30 conversion units, and then there's a further 200 new build houses in the grounds, and everybody within the development can use this space for events. So how does that feed into new build housing? I think for me, the work we've done at Sitting Country before we got too involved in new build and greenfield sites, it's all about looking at the history and the heritage and understanding what's there and what's important about a site. And we try to do that with our new build as well now. So the first thing for me is to look at historic plans and maps. And I've chosen my local market town, which is Saffron Walden, because it's got a great series of plans. This one dating, I think this one is 260 years old, this plan. And what's really interesting is you've got this very strong high street running north to south, and these east to west streets running off that. There's a church, which is a very focal point in the town. There's a market square, and we've got a common. There's the remains of a castle. And if you jump forward to the start of to 1897, you can see things haven't changed very much. We've still got, obviously, the road layouts are all the same. Church is still there. The market square is still there. These key strong routes throughout the town really help define it and help people orientate themselves within it. We zoom out again. You can see here's the high street running through, and then the street to the market and Market Hill. And this is the oldest photograph I can find of it. But you can see the church, which sits on the top of the hill. The high street you can just about make out running through here, and then in here somewhere is the market square. And this picture shows the market square, which is a really strong exercise in placemaking. So they didn't call it placemaking at the time. They just needed a market square in the middle of the town, to have their weekly markets. Got a cattle market through here. We've got a common through here. The castle is hidden behind the tree. It's not much of a castle, so I wouldn't travel to Saffron Walden for the castle, but I probably would travel to Saffron Walden for the market and the produce, because it's pretty fantastic. And the church is just off shot to the left. And I think what's interesting is if you see how the site's developed over the years. So 1919, 1950s, we're still relatively compact development in the centre of Saffron Walden. And then let's go back again, and then go forward to today. So again, you can see the market square, the castle, the church, the common, everything is still there. There's a really strong high street and strong accesses. So let's compare then to now. And you can see that Saffron Walden has been swamped by a huge amount of housing that's gone round. So you can just about see through here. This is the high street, and we've got the church here. The market square is in the middle here, but housing has just mushroomed all around the site. And for me, a big question is how good is that housing? Because Saffron Walden as a town is a beautiful town that lots of people come and visit at the weekends for shopping and socialising and things like that. And good placemaking is about creating places that people want to visit. But let's look at the housing. I mean, this is a typical 1980s piece of development, which is cram them in as much as they can, a complete maze of roads and streets, and no real natural wayfinding that you could see in the heart of Saffron Walden itself, with its strong high street and key accesses. And I think this is, terrible design. And actually, if I jump back a slide, you can see there is some new build design, which is a bit better than it was in the 80s. This is the 1980s stuff up at the top. But we've got some more modern stuff where you can begin to see public open space areas and straight lines and things being created. But to me, is that good enough design? And that's the key. If you are putting new housing on a green field or a brown field, is the quality of that housing good enough that people are going to appreciate it in years, generations, and centuries to come? And I think that to me, that's one of the most important things. So I think in summary, really, in terms of this section on looking at maps, for me, it's about having these really strong lines. So really strong high streets, strong market squares, so that you're traveling from destination to destination. So you say to someone, well, just meet me just off the market square, or I'll be on the high street, or something like that. So that it's rather than just go left along a wiggly road, go right, go left, go right, and then you might find my house. It's kind of good design, has good simple orientation. And it's not just Saffron Walden, there's lots of other towns that do this. This is Alford, which is a small village or small town in Suffolk. And again, it has a nice, strong market square in the middle. It's a church here. There's a rather nice street that comes down to the quay, which widens out with green on it, lots of continuous built frontage. And then even in smaller areas, so this is Mistley in Essex, where you've got some strong continuous frontages as you come into the village, some rather nice squares, which I'll show you a photograph of later on, which again form really pretty places. And you've then got a collection of kind of maltings buildings all down by the quay, which is really pretty. So this is one of our own developments. This is Manningtree Park in Essex, and I think you can hopefully see that we've tried to pick up really on some of the lessons looking at historic maps. So we have these really key village greens. So there's a big village green in the middle, and there's a secondary village green to the left, and they're connected by these very strong east-west or north-south routes through. There'll be one species of tree on the east-west and a different on the main route through, so that again they're different colours and foliages, which helps orientate yourselves. And the majority of the streets are either north, south, or east, west, just with the odd street coming in at 45 degrees, just to break things up a little bit. It's surrounded by a park and swales. There's quite a strong formal entrance where you're coming onto essentially a straight line of terrace houses, which we've been heavily influenced by New Square in Cambridge, which has some lovely Victorian and Georgian architecture within it. And then from these spaces, you then have little mews, courts, and you have lanes running off with larger detached houses around the edge. So it's about creating personality within the development. This is that kind of coloured rendering of it, and you can see really what we're trying to do and how we've tried to take lessons from other historic towns and villages. So the next thing is what you put in your developments. And I think, again, look back at history, and you can see that the vernacular architecture, and architecture was built really before architects got too involved, was generally pretty good, because the builder knew how to build and detail things and create brick arches. Would use local materials because that was the most efficient way to do it. And you tend to get rather beautiful, timeless buildings that just as they get older, they look more attractive and more beautiful. So these are generally more villagey kind of houses. We step forward, these are slightly more towny houses, so again, more continuous street frontages. Similar materials, but again, there's some yellow brick and there's some red brick. There's a lot of slate, some really interesting eaves details and fascia details. Nice, tall, proportioned windows with a nice rhythm to it. No random little toilet windows just by the front door, which kind of might be all right if it was cottage, but actually on something that's more Georgian, you want to keep it really simple. And then this is going into Cambridge, where again, from the distance, everything is generally yellow brick, but there's some rather nice details like little stone string courses to break things up, different types of frontages and columns and details and things. And then this is really just picking up on some of the more rural designs. And to me, if you get the details right and the material right and the proportions right, then it makes a huge difference. So these are some of our house types, which I've done shown you in a very simple black and white drawing, but there's lots of things we try and do, like taller windows downstairs, which is generally what you'd have in historic buildings. We're spending a lot of time at the moment trying to get some really attractive and timeless door surrounds, which are kind of unique to different house types and different styles, which match the other details. We've got some dental courses on the eaves. We've got some more wobbly fascias, and then we've got some more cottagey style ones where you can be slightly more random with the windows and have more rustic style front doors and canopies. So this is the Manning tree. This is the main approach you come through, which is, as I say, was heavily influenced by some terrace housing in Cambridge, with this strong gable at the middle and these pilasters coming down the front with terraces leading off at either side. This is another site in West Mersey where we've tried to pick up on the rural tradition. You have an Essex of timber boarded buildings, which again gives it some connection to the locality. So we spent a lot of time when we're doing Manning tree looking at historic photos to try and find influence on how things should be done, and it creates some it's fiddly to do sometimes, but when you get it right, it does look really nice, and our purchasers really appreciate it. We also do more urban sites. So this is factory number 1 in Bristol, where our site essentially is in the middle here. It was a Wills tobacco factory where they rolled and sliced and whatever they needed to do to the tobacco here, and then the head office were in the smart buildings around the edge. A lot of this is gone now, so there's a big Asda here and a big car park there. But the facade of this was still here. But when we took over, this was an empty car park at the back. And we created some new buildings within that car park, which we tried to pick up on the factory aesthetic, and we've named them after the designations and how the site was split up at the time. So there's a tobacco store and there's a cutting room next door. And we try and make them feel as architectural as possible and pick up on the history. And we've got parking underneath the podium deck. So I think the next thing, and possibly the most important thing for me, is how you create a community within your development. And for us, we don't necessarily want the Costa or Anissa, not that there's anything wrong with those, but actually try and find something a bit more aspirational to come into our developments. So this is one at the General in Bristol, where we did a deal with a local Michelin star restaurant owner who set up a Michelin star restaurant plus a tapas bar and a pizza bar within the basement areas, which were the former stalls below the hospital. And previously, when we bought this was a west-facing street onto a basin of water, but this essentially was a narrow street where people parked their cars when they were visiting their granny having a hip operation and things like that. It wasn't a very attractive spot, but we had the road closed permanently and created a space that the residents or everybody in Bristol can come and use. And internally, it's a really bustling place. This is the tapas bar where lots of people come in the evenings and at lunchtime and stuff to eat. And it's having that on your doorstep is a really great selling point, and it helps people to talk and meet and chat as you would expect. this then within our factory number 1 development, we have a brewery who sell their own beers, and again, it's a really nice thing to have. It's local Bristol beer in our local Bristol site. Um, this isn't actually one of our developments, but this is a picture of a farm shop and a cafe, and it has a really nice feel to it. And that they're selling local produce, places to sit, places to eat, and this is something we're looking to create at our site in Manningtree. But before I get to that, I'm jumping around again. This is the 1840 in Tooting in London. One of the great things about historic conversions is that you tend to have lots of listed grounds, which you can then create nice places for people to sit and chat and their kids to play. So we see a lot of this, obviously, in conversion in historic properties, but actually trying to create similar spaces in new build is really important to us. So back to Manningtree, we placed our cafe and shop on the northern side of the square, so you will be facing the south, so that there will be the people can sit out on the southerly aspect, looking at their kids playing on the green, having a nice cappuccino and things. And we really want to create that as the social centre for the village. And it's not that far a walk out towards the park and swales. And we also, because this is a rural location, actually wanted to make this a really rural space. So this is the CGI of our Essex style houses, and you've got in the CGI we've got sheep in there because we thought we'd use this as a sheep field, and actually that is what we have done. So lambs are about to be brought back into the field after lambing, and it helps to give that rural connection to people living there, and they can help feed the sheep and things. And we've had visits from school children as well who've come and had a look and looked at the sheep and things like that. And so I think trying to bring the community in that way too is really important. This is the centre where, again, this is our south-facing terraces where people are here to sit and have a coffee. So I think I've raced through this probably quite quickly, but for me, I suppose the key points are that, over the years working on historic properties, we've learned a lot about looking really carefully at what's there already. And we've tried to bring that into new build by taking the same approach, by looking back through old maps and old plans, seeing what there is to influence on that, and using that to help create our layouts and having simple, logical movement patterns in there. And then the buildings we create, trying to make them as timeless as possible by using materials that will weather well and picking up on local details. And then finally, really the most important thing is community. So this is a picture at the bottom is a picture of Finchingfield, which is another village in Essex, where on sunny weekends it's absolutely heaving people using the cafe, and it's a really nice small village that people come and visit at the weekend because it's a nice place. And what my aim is to try and create new developments that are and will develop into a similar quality to this, where we've got high quality architecture, high quality green spaces, and places for people to sit and meet and chat. I think if you do that and you encourage people to stay in the area they're living and they're not driving miles and miles, then it helps to make the community much more sustainable from a fuel point of view and a driving around point of view, and it helps make people know each other better and can look after each other. So essentially, I think that's it. I think it's, for me, hopefully people have found some of what I've said interesting, and thank you for listening.
Simon, thank you very much for joining us and sharing that wonderful presentation. It was really interesting to see all of the different examples that you showed us on the screen. When it comes to creating new build developments, there are obviously always challenges and obstacles presented. I'm curious to know, what are the challenges that arise specifically when it comes to creating a new build development that incorporates history and heritage?
Yeah, there's loads of challenges, but to me, those challenges are opportunities. So the most important thing is to understand what you've got and do the research, look back through the historic archives, get the right experts to input and inform what you're doing, so that when you actually do talk to the conservation officer and English Heritage and all the other people who may want to be involved, you can furnish them with a really strong knowledge of what you've got, which forms the backbone of anything you're presenting. And more often than not, those that understanding that history gives you loads of ideas and suggestions on how you can move forward, and you end up with something an awful lot richer than if you just treat it as a space to put some buildings in. But actually, by going back and looking through the history, you can find some fantastic inspiration for what you're going to develop on the site.
And thinking about the inspiration, what would you suggest when it comes to taking a greenfield site away from a village or a town? So in a sense, it's a sort of blank canvas. How would you suggest, or where would you suggest taking the inspiration from in order to still incorporate those elements into this new development?
Yeah, to me, there never is a blank canvas. And even if it's a green field, there will be something there. So again, it's the same answer. We look at the old maps and the plans and see what was there. There may have been a Roman road, or there might have been an orchard, or there might have been a railway line. There might be something in there which will give you a clue as to how you might develop the site. But if it really is a field with almost nothing, then look at the local villages and towns and architecture for inspiration, and look at the street patterns and the scale and the proportions and materials, and use that to inform you, so that there's some connection to the locality to make a development unique, rather than just cookie cutter shape squeezed in as much as they can. That's rather dull in my mind. It's about finding inspiration from what's around you.
Well, it's been very insightful in the session, Simon. So thank you very much for joining us today at Show Home Live.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and that's I hope people have found it interesting. And there's lots of amazing stuff out there. But thank you very much.